Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Gnananjana-shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Namo Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine. Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shrivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So here we are seeing the four Kumaras. They have entered the 6 gates. They have already crossed over the 6 different gates, Dwaras of Vaikuntha, and now they are at the 7th door. And there were 2 doormen, Jaya and Vijaya, and these 4 great sages, the 4 Kumaras, they were being stopped at the 7th gate. So that is the description given here. Tan Vikshaya, seeing these 4 sages, Tan Vikshaya, Vikshaya means after seeing them. How did they see them? How did the gatemen, the doorkeepers, in what way did they see? Vata Rasnams. Vata means actually atmosphere, and Rasanams means dressed. So they had no dress, their only dress was the atmosphere. That means they were not wearing any dress. Whom did they see? Chaturaha Kumaran. So these 2 doorkeepers saw the 4 Kumaras. How did they see them? Vatarasnams, naked, only atmosphere as their dress. Vriddhan, actually in reality they were the oldest of all living creatures, because after Brahma even Shiva was born later on. The 4 Kumaras were the first one to take birth. So they were the oldest of all the other living entities, including Lord Shiva. So that's why they said Vriddhan, oldest. But how they were appearing? Dasha Ardha Vayaso. Vayaso means appearing in the age like. Dasha Ardha. Dasha means 10 and Dasha-ardha means 5. So they were looking like small children. They were looking like small 5-year-old children. And even though they were appearing like 5-year-old children, what was their consciousness? Were they ordinary living entities? Viditatma Tattvan. Even though they were appearing like 5-year-old children, they were the realizer of the truth. They had known the truth. Prabhupada translates, even though they were the oldest of all living creatures and had realized the truth of the self. Viditatma Tattvan means they had realized the truth of the self. So what did they do? These 2 doormen, after seeing them like this, entering without any dress, and even though they were the oldest of all the living entities, and even though they were not some ordinary people, they were not even ordinary sages, they were self-realized sages. They had realized the truth of the self, in spite of knowing, in spite of understanding, and in spite of having such a great stature, they were blocked. Vetrena cha asakhalayatam. So, with their staff, they were stopped. They were not allowed to go. They were forbidden to go further. And so somebody may say that that was their duty. As a doorkeeper, they were supposed to stop. But Bhagavatam says, actually they did not deserve to be stopped. Atad arnam stau. Prabhupada translate, Atad arnan means not deserving to be forbidden like that, not deserving to be stopped with the staff like this. They were not deserving like that. Why? Tejo vihasya. Actually their glories, they were very glorious, but their glories were disregarded. Vihasya means they disregarded the glories of these great sages and stopped them. So was it very pleasing to the Lord? The Lord was very happy that yes, these 4 Kumaras are stopped by my doorkeeper. No. Bhagavat pratikula shilav. Actually, the Lord was very displeased. Bhagavat pratikula. Pratikula means it was not at all pleasing to the Lord. Shilav means this nature of these 2 doorkeepers was not very pleasing. So Prabhupada explains why it was not very pleasing to the Lord. So, translation, the 4 boy sages, that is Chaturaha Kumara, who had nothing to cover their bodies but the atmosphere, Vatarasanams, they had nothing to cover their bodies except the atmosphere, looked only 5-year-old. Dasharadha Vayaso, even though they were the oldest of all living creatures, Vriddhan, even though they were the oldest of all living creatures, and had realized the truth of the self, Viditatma Tattvan. But when the porters, who happened to possess a disposition quite unpalatable to the Lord, so tan Bhagavat Pratikula Shilo, these 2 doorkeepers, they possessed the nature which was not very pleasing to the Lord. Tan Vikshaya, when they saw these sages entering, they blocked their way with their staffs. Vetrena cha asakhalayatam. So they stopped, they forbade them to enter. Although the sages did not deserve such treatment at their hands, atad arhanam stau. They did not deserve, even though they did not deserve, they were stopped by these 2 doorkeepers. So, there are 2 very important things which Prabhupada mentions and which in this verse we can see. One is that they did not deserve to be stopped like that because of their glorious qualities, because they were not some ordinary people. So if some ordinary people are entering, yes, they had the right to stop them. But these were the great sages. And what kind of great sages? Viditatma Atma Tattvam. Vidita Atma Tattvan. Because they were self-realized souls. They were not some ordinary people. Such saints were not to be forbidden to enter the kingdom of Vaikuntha. But by chance the doormen objected to their entrance. This was not fitting. So why this was not fitting? The Lord is always anxious to serve sages like the Kumaras. But in spite of knowing this fact, the doormen, they are the servants. They know their master. They know that the Supreme Lord, Lord Narayana, Lord Vishnu, He is actually very, very anxious to serve such great sages like the 4 Kumaras. In spite of knowing this, the 2 doorkeepers objected, forbade the 4 Kumaras. So this was not very pleasing to the Lord. That's why. So, actually, the Vedic literature points out that this is one of the most important characteristic of Vedic culture, that a person who is God conscious, the person who is self-realized, is actually the one who should be given real honor. Whereas today, actually we can see, first of all, generally it is not that people themselves are not realized, and rather they pose themselves as being very elevated. And how do they pose? Just by externals. Internally, actually all kinds of anarthas are there, but externally they pose themselves. And that is how, when people have seen them, that they had been respecting them so much, but after some time, when they enter into their private life and they see that how fallen that person is, just like the other day I was giving the example, that even Prabhupada, he had become, indifferent to these sadhus, and that is how people have become today, isn't it? When he saw that his father was exploited by these so-called sadhus, they would come to his house in the dress of a sadhu, and then Prabhupada gave that example that there was one sadhu who was living nearby. Morning time he would dress up like a sadhu and he would be begging, and in the evening he would be like a normal pant shirt person and he would be going cinemas and all other things, isn't it? So because of that, people have lost that respect for sadhus, isn't it? And today the culture is like that people who are having, that is what is predicted even in Srimad Bhagavatam, that somehow or other, if a person is having a lot of money with him to enjoy sense gratification, that kind of person will be honored more in this age, rather than a person who is learned, rather than a person who is self-realized. But that was not Vedic system. In fact, Bhagavatam points out that even if you may have become one of the greatest philanthropists, you may be very charitable, and you may think that that is the success of human form of life, but Bhagavatam points out that actually if a person is not inquiring about self-realization, all his activities are supposed to be defeated. Even though he may be most charitable, he may be most pious personality, but if he is not inquiring about absolute truth, if he is not inquiring about Atma Tattvam, then all his activities should be considered to be defeated. So this is the teachings given by Rishabdev to his own sons. So he says, Parabhavastavat abhodajato yavan na jignasata atma tattvam. Parabhava means defeat and misery. Actually, until and unless we are able to defeat Maya and cross over this material nature, we will be under miseries. Why? Because the moment we are defeated by Maya, we will come under the control of Maya, we will be miserable. So Prabhupada translates it very beautifully. Parabhava means defeat and misery. So because of being defeated by Maya, we will be miserable. Parabhavastavat abodhajataha how the living entity becomes defeated and thus miserable? So long, tavat means so long, abodha jataha means born, janma, abodha means ignorance, born out of ignorance. These miseries are born out of ignorance. When these miseries are born out of ignorance, when the person becomes defeated, parabhava. How does he become defeated? Yavan ajignasata atma tattvam. Till a person, yavat means till that time, so long, na jignasata, he does not inquire about atma tattvam. Till a person inquires about atma tattvam, all his activities are considered to be defeated. And then what is the result? Parabhavas tavat abodha jataha. He will be under miseries. Why? Born out of ignorance. So Prabhupada translates it very nicely. As long as one does not inquire about spiritual values of life, that is jignasata atma tattvam, one is defeated and subjected to miseries arising from ignorance. So as long as one does not inquire about spiritual values of life, one is defeated and subjected to miseries arising from ignorance. Then one may think, no, I may have done some kind of papa karma, but if I do punya karma, probably I can cancel my papa karma. My miseries will come down, isn't it? Sometimes generally people think like this. Okay, I have done a lot of papa karma. Now I will go and take bath in river Ganga. So all my whatever papa karma I have done, they will be all washed away. So they think by doing punya karma, they will be able to get rid of papa karma and thus miseries will go away. But actually that is not so. So very nicely, further it says, Yavat kriya tavat idam manovai karmatmakam yena sharira bandaha. Whatever activities you may do with your impure mind, whatever even greatest of karma activities, pious activities you may do, but if your mind is impure, with that whatever activities you are going to do, sharira bandaha, you are going to take more and more repeated birth in this material world. You will not become free from that. So repeated birth means repeated miseries in this world. So Prabhupada translates that, be it sinful or pious, karma has its resultant actions. If a person is engaged in any kind of karma, his mind is called karmatmaka, colored with fruitive activity. So once your mind is not pure, it is colored with any kind of fruitive activity, it is going to give you next birth. As long as the mind is impure, consciousness is unclear, and as long as one is absorbed in fruitive activity, he has to accept a material body. You see? So, until and unless actually a person inquires about Atma Tattvam, he inquires about his self, till that time actually all his activities are just defeated. Prabhupada explains very beautifully in the purport. Generally people think one should act very piously in order to be relieved from misery, but this is not a fact. So one may think that I will do all kind of good activities, I will do all kind of punya karma, and thus I will have no miseries. No, that is a mistaken idea. Miseries are born from ignorance. Till a person is in ignorance thinking I am this material body, or I am this material mind, I am intelligence, I am false ego, any of these material identification is there, till that time actually he is in ignorance. So miseries are born from ignorance. And Atma Tattva means when one is in knowledge about the self. So when one is in knowledge, then only it is possible that miseries can go away. So Prabhupada quotes that verse from Bhagavad Gita where Lord Krishna says, knowledge of the self is like fire. Only that can burn the miseries to ash. So Prabhupada says, as a blazing fire turns firewood to ashes, O Arjuna, so does the fire of knowledge burn to ashes all reactions to material activities. So this is possible only when one acquires the knowledge about Atma Tattvam. And actually, we can see that this was a great gift of Srila Prabhupada. He explained this Atma Tattvam in such a clear way that even we are all very common people, right? We are all very general, common people, not some great scholar. Any of us were some great scholars, some great Pandita, isn't it? Even a common person like us, we were able to understand. Anybody you ask in Krishna consciousness, he'll be able to tell, I am not this body. This truth, even though we may not have actually realized, but at least the understanding about what is Atma Tattvam, what do we mean, what do we understand, it is so easy for us to understand because Prabhupada made it so clear. I remember before coming to Krishna consciousness, I had been to many places. Actually, it so happened that my grandmother passed away right in front of my eyes. So that was a terrible shock for me. And I used to spend a lot of time with my grandmother in my holidays time when we used to have 2 months holidays. So it was night, I was sleeping with her, and then suddenly she got a heart pain and she was, practically wailing and crying. And we can see actually the material world is like that unless and until a person is trained, he cannot chant the holy name of the Lord. Even in distress, he cannot chant. So she was calling out her son's name, and it was not some Krishna's name, unfortunately. And by the time the son arrived, she left the body. So that left me into a kind of thinking that what is this life all about? Person comes and he just passes away from this world. So practically for 2 months I was roaming around into different ashrams. And I went to many places, many different places. I heard different speeches, I read some of the books of so-called Swamis, but practically nothing I could understand what exactly they're talking about. So many different things they're talking about, nothing clearly goes into the head, isn't it? So ambiguous it was, so difficult to understand, you see. But we can see the moment we come in touch with the books of Prabhupada, everything is so crystal clear. Prabhupada has explained everything so beautifully, isn't it? The whole Bhagavad Gita, we may have read so many shlokas, yada yada dharmasya, we were all chanting all these different shlokas, paritranaya sadhunam, vinashaya cha dushkritam. But what does Bhagavad Gita teach about? What is the teaching of Bhagavad Gita? What is the primary teaching what Bhagavad Gita talks about? We had no idea about all these things, isn't it? But after reading it from Prabhupada, we can get so clearly. Just like I was seeing even in today's conversation, Prabhupada is explaining so beautifully. Such a simple explanation. Prabhupada is saying, you are not this shirt. Is it very difficult to realize? When we are all, let us say, we are all coming today with some shirt, and tomorrow we change the shirt, we send it for washing and we wear another shirt. So Prabhupada is saying, is it very difficult to realize? And then Prabhupada is saying, I am wearing this shawl. I am not this shawl. But then Prabhupada is also further explaining, but still, whether you are in knowledge or you are in ignorance, that does not matter. You are still individual. One should not think Atma Tattva means once I get knowledge, then I will understand that actually I am not this body but I am God. No, still you are individual living entity. That is what Prabhupada is explaining. So easy to understand, isn't it? Now, this concept, where did Prabhupada get from? It's very beautifully explained in Bhagavad Gita. We may have read all those shlokas like parrot, we would have chanted, isn't it? Dehino asmin yatha dehe komaram yovanam jara tatha dehantar praptir dhiras tatra namuhyati. How beautifully Prabhupada explains about this. Prabhupada explains the logic behind this shloka. How can we realize, how can we understand that actually, logically, we are not this body. We are different from this body. Dehino asmin yatha dehe. Prabhupada is segregating that there is somebody who is occupying this deha and there is deha. Deha is undergoing changes. Komaram, yovanam, jara. But the person who is experiencing this, he is not undergoing change. We are experiencing childhood, we are experiencing youthhood, and we will experience old age. That is not undergoing change. So Prabhupada is saying, it is so simple to understand, isn't it? Just like we all remember, and sometimes we quote this when we are preaching to others, that once Prabhupada called one boy and he asked him, he was holding something in his hand. What is this? So he said, sir, this is my pen. This is your pen? Yes, sir, this is my pen. Then Prabhupada held his hand. What is this? This is my hand. This is my head. This is my ears. This is my nose. Then Prabhupada asked, where are you? You are saying this is mine, this is mine, this is mine. Where are you among this? So Prabhupada said, even a small child can actually realize. Even a small child can understand. He is saying my hand, he is not saying I hand. He is not saying I head, I leg. It is mine. It belongs to me. I am different from this. Isn't it? See how these concepts were made so simplified by Prabhupada. Even in common language, Prabhupada said, in common language what do you say? My father has passed away. How Prabhupada beautifully relates. When we say my father has passed away, what does it mean? Arey, father is still lying, his body is still lying. Now you have realized he has passed away. Isn't it? Whole life when he was leaving, you were thinking this is your father, that body is your father. Now still the body is lying, now you are not saying this is my father. Now you are saying he has passed away. Correct? Who has passed away? Body is still lying. The soul which was occupying this body, that has passed away. So this knowledge of Atma Tattvam, what is self, what is super self, isn't it? This was made very simplified by Prabhupada. Not like juggleries of word, isn't it? So Prabhupada explains actually what is Atma Tattvam. What is the meaning of self-realization? Because sometimes people think self-realization, God-realization is something different. Isn't it? Self-realization has different stages. That's the only difference. It is not different. In preliminary stage, one may only realize himself to be eternal. One may realize himself to be different from matter. That is only preliminary stage. In advanced stage, one will be able to understand, I am not just aloof from matter. That is not my identity. Negativity of matter is not my identity. By negating something, I cannot define myself. That is only preliminary understanding. That is only to make you understand this is what you are not. Because why? I am thinking now I am body. So Vedic literature is telling you are not body. So that exactly is not self-realization. Just understanding I am not body is not self-realization. I am not body, I am not mind, I am not intelligence, I am not false ego. Then what are you? When one understands completely, I am not this material body, I am part and parcel of Krishna. I am eternal servant and my occupation is to serve Krishna. That is real self-realization. You see? So, that was what was actually honored in the Vedic times, the person who was self-realized. So these great sages, they were self-realized. Of course, they were at the preliminary understanding of self-realization. They were Brahman realized. They had realized they were not this body. They had nothing to do with this body. They were away from honor and dishonor, all those things. They were away from duality in that sense. But of course, they were still to realize the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And they wanted to enter Vaikuntha. They wanted to meet the Supreme Lord. But they were objected. They were forbidden here. So, this disposition of his guard, of these two doormen who were there, was not very, very pleasing to the Lord. So actually, it is very, very important to understand devotional service means, even though we are supposedly serving the Lord, it should not be the way we think we are serving the Lord. Now these two doorkeepers are thinking they are doing the service to the Lord. They are not allowing somebody to enter, and that is their duty. But actually real devotional service means to understand what is pleasing to the Lord. Depending upon what is pleasing to the Lord when one serves the Lord, that is called as devotional service. So this was not very pleasing to the Lord, and that is why we find that later on these two doormen, they were cursed by these four Kumaras. They were penalized, they were punished by these four Kumaras. And of course the Lord was still anxious about because they were also devotees, but they had committed an offense towards these great sages. And the Lord was very anxious, and that is how, their curse was reduced later on, that they were able to return after some time back to Godhead, after taking few births in this material world. So, this is another very important thing which Prabhupada explains in this purport, is about the Lord is always anxious to serve sages like the Kumaras. But in spite of knowing this fact, the doormen astonishingly and outrageously prohibited them from entering. Now, how do we understand those things? Whether something is pleasing to the Lord or something is not very pleasing to the Lord. So this can be known by knowing from the spiritual master. Yasya prasadat bhagavat prasado, yasya aprasadat nagati kutopi. If we understand from the spiritual master that chanting 16 rounds is very pleasing to the Lord, we should abide by that order. You see, one should not think, no, I will still be able to please the Lord. What is there if I chant or I don't chant? It's like I was reading, I think yesterday, I don't know whether that quote is still there. In that quote, Prabhupada is saying, one who is not following the order of chanting 16 rounds and 4 regulative principles, he is not my disciple. Not that I have become initiated, Diksha ho gaya hai, now I am eternal disciple of Prabhupada. It depends on us. It is an agreement. Till this agreement is binding, till we are following the orders of the spiritual master. Otherwise it is not binding to the spiritual master. isn't it? Of course, the spiritual master is very, very merciful that even though we may stray away, and the spiritual master still comes back to drag the living entity, to take his disciple back to Godhead somehow or other. But we should not make our spiritual master to appear again and again in this material world, isn't it? To take us back like that. So, Diksha does not mean that, I have become initiated now and now all my business is over. Actually, business is not over, business has started when we have taken Diksha. It has just begun like that. And if we strictly follow the orders of the spiritual master, then we can be ascertained that the Supreme Lord is pleased with whatever we do, if we follow the orders of spiritual master. And if we disobey, then we should understand that that disposition is not very pleasing to the Lord. So what is pleasing to the Lord, that can be known through the via medium of spiritual master. So we'll stop here. Today is a Diksha day of Prabhupada. We will read little bit. Yeah, one question till that time we can ask. So few paragraphs from Prabhupada's Diksha we will read. And yeah. Yes. Yes. Okay. Same question may be asked about Parikshit Maharaj. Parikshit Maharaj is a great devotee of the Lord. And what is that Brahmana? He is only one childish Brahmana curses Parikshit Maharaj. It's all the arrangement of the Lord. So when the Lord wants to fight, when the Lord also has desire to fight, that he does not do in Vaikuntha Loka. But the Lord also has desire. So when the Lord wants to fight, he can fight only with his devotees. Right? Only when his devotees take up the role like a demon to fight with the Lord, only that is possible. Only then it is possible. So this was arrangement of the Lord through his devotee Jaya and Vijaya. And they were cursed by the 4 Kumaras to take birth, that they don't deserve to be in the spiritual world, better they should go down to the material world. So that was arrangement of the Lord. Actually, the Lord's Leelas were to be performed. But by that, or by all those arrangements, we can learn a lot of things. Understood? Even though it is the Leela of the Lord, we can learn a lot of things. That what is pleasing to the Lord, what is not pleasing to the Lord, all those important lessons we can learn from this. So definitely it was the arrangement of the Lord. Okay, I'll read from. Because too many pages were there, I did not take a printout of that. So few paragraphs I will read. And I'll send you as an email. Later on you can read more about this. Very interesting. All of you actually should go through this. Around 23 pages are there about Prabhupada's Diksha, Prabhupada meeting his spiritual master, many meetings with his spiritual master. So later on you can read more about that. This is from Swami in a Strange Land by Yogeshwar Prabhu. In 1922, one of Abhay's closest friend, Narendra Malik, met monks from Gaudiya Math, a Vaishnava institution, and the monks invited him to meet their guru. Like other well-to-do residents of Calcutta, Narendra was willing to support religious organizations if they were honorable. But honor was not always obvious. Many sannyasis came knocking at his door looking for donations. Who could tell what was their motive? Matha, religious schools, abounded, and the monks charged with raising funds looked more or less same. There was every chance his money would be wasted supporting a place for loafers who sponged off innocent Hindu families. The greater danger was inadvertently giving money to monks who indulged in sex or ate meat. Celibacy and a meat-free diet were behavioral requirements for Vaishnavas. Narendra's friend Abhay always had good advice to offer, and Narendra asked that he accompany him to the matha and provide a second opinion. Abhay declined. So his friend Narendra invited him to go and meet a sannyasi who had come to Calcutta from Mayapur. And Prabhupada, at that time, who was known as Abhay, a college student, he declined because he had seen many sannyasis coming to his house asking for money. From childhood, he said, he had seen cheaters dressed like monks exploit his father's charitable nature. They took Gaur Mohan's donation, stepped outside his house and lit up cigarettes. Some of his family relations ran a boarding house for single men. Abhay recalled seeing one of these boarders dressed in saffron robes, gulp down a cup of tea, finish a cigarette, and then grab his water pot and staff and head out door to door to collect his daily sadhu's donation. Abhay had no patience for such people. I am not going, he told Narendra. There were more pressing matters. Orders in his pharmacy were waiting to be filled. Supplies needed to be restocked. There were customers to serve. Meetings of Gandhi's movement to organize. And simply no time for listening to another so-called sadhu. Come on, Narendra insisted. As a courtesy to his friend, Abhay agreed to be dragged along. So Prabhupada somehow, because his friend was dragging him, telling him to go, he agreed. They arrived at a building at North Calcutta. A sign over the door announced that the one-story structure was headquarters of Gaudiya Mutt, the monastery of Greater India. Abhay and Narendra climbed a worn marble staircase to the roof. Air conditioning was scarce in those days, and public events were often scheduled on rooftops, where evening breezes offered relief from the day's heat. So the program was going on the rooftop. Monks greeted the two guests and brought them to the front of the gathering to meet the head of their mission. Even seated, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur's stature was obvious to Abhay. This was not another pretender sadhu. He seemed at least 6 feet tall and sat straight. His forehead was broad and high, his color fair. He wore the traditional robes of a sannyasi, 2 red dyed lengths of cloth, one wrapped around his waist, the other draped over his shoulder. 3 strands of small wooden tulsi beads looped around his neck. 2 stripes of white clay ran from the bridge of his nose to his shaved head, the full uniform of a devout Krishna worshipper, and in Bhakti Siddhanta's case, Acharya of the Gaudiya Mutt. Vaishnava community elders elevated a candidate to the exalted position of Acharya, head of a recognized lineage of teacher based on mastery of scripture and personal character. Historically, some Acharyas received their appointment as a result of family affiliation, for there was a sentiment that virtue and ability were inherited. If, for instance, a man's father and grandfather had served with distinction, it was assumed he possessed comparable talents. In Bhakti Siddhanta's case, both criteria applied. He was son of the late Bhakti Vinod Thakur, respected former head of the Vaishnava community and prolific author and poet. And in his own right, Bhakti Siddhanta demonstrated the character and wisdom of a true Acharya. Abhay and Narendra touched their foreheads to the ground in the traditional way of greeting a holy person. Something about Abhay must have impressed itself upon Bhakti Siddhanta, as barely had Abhay stood up when Bhakti Siddhanta said. So after paying their obeisances, when Abhay Charan stood up, Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur pointed out, "You are an educated young man. Why don't you take Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's message and spread it in English to the Western world?" In the years to come, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada would describe that he hesitated when his Guru issued the instruction that changed his life. Leave everything and travel to the West? How could he do that? Of course, Abhay knew quite a bit about Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. His father and mother had raised him as Chaitanya follower, and since childhood he had been chanting Hare Krishna as Mahaprabhu had taught. But aside from an astrologer's questionable prediction, nothing in the profile of Abhay's life suggested he would become a religious leader. He and his wife Radharani had a 1-year-old daughter and were planning to have more children. He earned an honest living and paid his bills and left the religious grandstanding to others. More to the point, Abhay followed Gandhi and believed the real key to moving India forward was freedom from the British rule. For hundreds of years, Bengal's Hindus and Muslims had lived in relative peace. It was the British who set one religion on the other and turned neighbors into enemies. When it came to choosing between religion and nationhood, to Abhay's 26-year-old mind, Gandhi's movement came first. Rid India of the Raj, and her millennium wisdom will have a platform for expression. Sir, Abhay said, who will hear Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's message as long as we are a dependent nation? Let us first achieve our independence, then we can spread Indian culture. Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati disagreed. Mahaprabhu's message did not depend on politics. Real independence, he said, meant freeing the soul from the shackles of illusion. Doctrines of impersonalism and voidism pervaded India's thinking. These dangerous ideas decrying the personhood of God were the true enemies, not the British. Until people were trained to know the difference between body and the soul's ultimate fulfillment in love of God, they would never know peace. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had given the formula: chant Hare Krishna, follow the teachings of Bhagavad Gita, and the sun of Krishna will rise to illuminate a dark time. It was indeed a dark time. In 1920, a visit by the Prince of Wales had turned into a 4-day riot. Shops were looted and any Europeans seen in public were attacked. Just weeks before Abhay's meeting with Bhakti Siddhanta, a mob stormed a police station in the town of Chori Chora, beat 22 officers to death and burned their bodies. Nationalism had released poisonous resentment and civil disobedience was careening out of control. As much as Abhay had convinced himself, Gandhi held the torch of truth. He could not stand by that conviction after hearing Bhakti Siddhanta speak about re-spiritualizing the world. By comparison with such a global mission, Gandhi's plan for a politically independent country seemed stunned and trifling. Up to that moment, Abhay's perspective had been primarily Indian. Bhakti Siddhanta was proposing something greater, something universal. Despite his attraction to nationalism, something in the brief exchange with Bhakti Siddhanta quickened Abhay's pulse. They had not spoken long, maybe an hour, but in that short space of time, Bhakti Siddhanta managed to refute Abhay's assumption that God took a backseat to politics and that independence offered a lasting solution to India's woes. India suffered from the lack of spiritual revolution, Bhakti Siddhanta argued, and campaigning for political independency merely distracted from the more critical campaign launched by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to reinstate God in His creation. British rule was irrelevant. Not only India, but all of humanity needed liberating. The next day, Abhay walked into the office of his employer, Dr. Kartik Chandra Bose, and resigned. Bose had been Day's family doctor for more than 20 years and had watched Abhay grow up. The elder physician appreciated the personal touch Abhay always brought to their customer, such as answering requests for pricing with handwritten letters, but Bose always recognized how headstrong Abhay could be and knew better than to question his plans. I understand your attraction to this teacher, Bose said. Still, you are a family man. I will give you a franchise to my company's product. Sell whatever you like, whenever you like. The commissions will be more than your current salary, and you still will have time for this pursuit. Abhay weighed his options. What was work or money or even family compared to the instruction he had received on the roof of the Gaudiya Mutt? Bhakti Siddhanta had opened his eyes to the meaning of Krishna devotion, and taking Krishna's message to the West was no trifling matter. It would not happen between sales calls. Still, Bose had a point. No one travels abroad without funds, and pharmaceuticals had potential. India was ripe for Indian-made goods, and Bose's price were better than those of British. Maybe he could save some money and then go to the West. Abhay agreed to Bose's offer to start a franchise. The talk with his wife did not go as well. Radharani did not share her husband's enthusiasm, religious or otherwise. And here he was telling her Gandhi had it wrong and that he would go to the West. There are no witness or diaries from which to assess her reaction to Abhay's meeting with Bhakti Siddhanta. But when they married, it is likely she did not envision becoming a missionary's wife. Then this is from Prabhupada's own lecture on Disappearance Day. Prabhupada. So when I met Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, it is a long story how I met him. One of my friends, he dragged me, laughing. I was at that time nationalist and manager in a big chemical factory. My age was about 24 years. So one of my friend, he asked me, there is a nice sadhu, Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur. He has come in Calcutta, so let us go and see. I was reluctant. I thought, just like so, there are so many sadhus. So I was not very much because I had very bad experience, not very good. So I said, oh, all these sadhus, there are many. You'll be glad to know that even in my young age or early age, it was Krishna's grace. Even amongst my young friend, I was considered the leader. Laughing. In my school days, in my college days, in my private friendship, some way or other, I had become their leader. And one astrologer, sometimes he read my hand. He said in Hindi, Kukum Chalena. Kukum Chalena means your hand speaks that your order will be executed. Devotees, Jai. Prabhupada. So anyway, it was Krishna's grace. I would not go. But their point of view was that unless I certify that sadhu, Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he will not be accepted. Therefore he dragged me. So I went to see Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur on that day. On the first meeting, we offered our obeisances, it was practice. So immediately he began his talking, that you are educated young man. Why don't you take up Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's cult and preach all over the English knowing public? Why don't you take up this matter? So I argued with him in so many ways. At that time I was nationalist. So I told, who will accept our message? We are a dependent nation, nobody will care. In this way, in my own way, in these younger days, but we belong to the Vaishnava family, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Nityananda, Radha Govinda, that is our worshipable deity. So I was very glad that Radha Krishna cult, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's cult, this sadhu is trying to preach. It is very nice. So at that time, we had some talk, and of course, I was defeated by his argument. Laughter. And then, when we came out, we were offered prasadam, very nice treatment in the Gaudiya Mutt. And when I came out on the street, this my friend asked me, what is your opinion of this sadhu? Then I said, here is the right person who has taken up Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's message, and now it will be distributed. Devotees, Jai Prabhupada. So, I was at that time a fool, but I opined like that, and I accepted him as my spiritual master immediately, not officially, but in my heart. That was in 1922. Okay. I'll read second meeting with Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur in Vrindavan. This is from Satswarup Das Goswami's Leelamrita. In October of 1932, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati led a group of hundreds of disciples and pilgrims to a month-long parikrama of the sacred places of Vrindavan. Vrindavan residents and visitors perform parikrama by following the old dry bed of the Yamuna river and Vrindavan area, stopping at the places where Krishna performed his pastimes when he roamed in Vrindavan 5,000 years ago. Abhay had wanted to attend the Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur's parikrama, but could not because of his work. Nevertheless, on the 20th day of the pilgrimage, he travelled from Allahabad, intent on seeing Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati again and hoping to join the parikrama party at Koshi, just outside Vrindavan, at least for a day. When Abhay had heard from the members of Allahabad Gaudiya Mutt about the parikrama, he had been fully occupied with his local Prayag pharmacy business and travelling to secure new accounts. But he had calculated how he could join at least for a day or two, and he fixed in his mind again obtaining the darshan of Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati. Srila Prabhupada is speaking. I was not initiated at that time of the parikrama, but I had very good admiration for these Gaudiya Mutt people. They were very kind to me, so I thought, what are these people doing in this parikrama? Let me go and see. So I met them at Koshi. So once again from that book. Abhay arrived in Mathura by train from Allahabad and approached Koshi by rickshaw. The countryside was full of charm for Abhay. Instead of factories and large buildings, there were mostly forest. And aside from the main paved road on which he travelled, there were only dirt roads and softy sandy lanes. As a Vaishnava, Abhay felt sensations an ordinary man would not. Now and then he sighted a peacock in the field, its exotic plumage proclaiming the glories of Vrindavan and Krishna. Even a non-devotee, however, could appreciate the many varieties of birds, their interesting cries and songs filling the air. Occasionally a tree would be filled with many chirping sparrows making their urgent twilight clamor before resting for the night. Even one unaware of the special significance of Vrindavan could feel a relief of mind in this simple countryside where people built fires from cow manure fuel and cooked their evening meals in the open, their fires adding rich natural smells to the inedible mixture which was the order of the earth. There were many old trees and colorful stretches of flower bushes of bright violet chameli trees with delicate white parijata blossoms and big yellow kadamba flowers rarely seen outside Vrindavan. On the road there were lively horse-drawn tanga traffic. The month of Kartik, October-November, was one of the several times of the year that drew many pilgrimages to Vrindavan. The one-horse tanga carried large families, some coming from hundreds of miles away. Larger bands of pilgrims, grouped by village, walked together. The women dressed in bright-colored saris, brown-skinned men and women sometimes singing bhajans, carrying but a few simple possessions as they headed for a town of thousands of temple Vrindavan. And there were businessmen like Abhay dressed more formally coming from a city, maybe to spend the weekend. Most of them had at least some semblance of a religious motive to see Krishna in the temple, to bathe in the holy Yamuna river, to visit the site where Lord Krishna had performed his pastimes such as lifting of Govardhan hill, the killing of Keshi demon, or the dancing in the evening with the gopis. Abhay was sensitive to the atmosphere of Vrindavan and he noted the activity along the road. But more than that, he cherished with anticipation the fulfillment of his journey, his meeting again after a long separation, the saintly person he always thought of within himself, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati, who had spoken to him in Calcutta and had convinced him of Lord Chaitanya's mission to preach Krishna consciousness. Abhay would soon see him again, and this purpose filled his mind. Upon reaching the lantern-illuminated camp of Gaudiya Mutt and inquiring at the registration post, he was allowed to join the Parikrama village. He was assigned to a tent of Grahastha men and was offered prasadam. The people were friendly and in good spirits, and Abhay talked of his activities with the Matha member in Calcutta and Allahabad. Then there was a gathering. A sannyasi was making an announcement. This evening, he said, there would be a scheduled visit to a nearby temple to see the deity of Sheshasai Vishnu. Some of the pilgrims cheered, Hari Bol, Hare Krishna. The sannyasi also announced that His Divine Grace Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur would speak that evening for the last time, and he would be leaving the Parikrama party the next day. So there was a choice, going on Parikrama or staying for the lecture. Srila Prabhupada is talking. So I met them in Koshi, and Keshav Maharaj was informing that Srila Bhakti Siddhanta is going to Mathura tomorrow morning and he will speak Hari Katha this evening. Anyone who wants may remain, or otherwise they may go to see Sheshasai Vishnu. So at that time I think only 10 or 12 men remained. Sridhar Maharaj was one of them. And I thought, what can I see? Sheshasai. Let me hear what Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur will speak. Let me hear. When Abhay arrived, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta was already speaking. He sat with his back erect, a shawl around his shoulder, not speaking like a professional lecturer, giving a secluded performance, but addressing a small gathering in his room. At last, Abhay was in his presence again. Abhay marveled to see and hear him again. This unique soul possessed of Krishna Katha, speaking uninterruptedly about Krishna in his deep, low voice, in ecstasy and deep knowledge. Abhay sat and heard with rapt attention. An hour by 2 hours, the already small gathering in Bhakti Siddhanta's room gradually became thin. A few sannyasis left, excusing themselves to tend to duties connected with Parikrama camp. Only a few intimate leaders remained. Abhay was the only outsider. Of course, he was a devotee, not an outsider. But in the sense, he was not a sannyasi, was not handling any duties, was not even initiated, and he was not traveling with the Parikrama, but had joined only for a day. In that sense, he was an outsider. The philosophy Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati was speaking was democratically open to whoever would give an ardent hearing, and Abhay was doing. He was listening with wonder. Sometimes he would not even understand something, but he would go on listening intently, submissively, his intelligence drinking in the word. He felt Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati revealing to him the direct vision of spiritual world, just as a person reveals something by opening a door or pushing aside a curtain. He was revealing the reality, and this reality was loving service to the lotus feet of Radha Krishna, the supremely worshipable personality of Godhead. How masterfully he spoke, and with utter conviction and boldness. It was with such awe that Abhay listened and fastened attention. Of course, all Vaishnavas accepted Krishna as their worshipable Lord. 2 more minutes. But how conclusively and with such sound logic was the faith of Vaishnavas established by this great teacher. After several hours, Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati stopped speaking. Abhay felt prepared to go on listening without cessation, and yet he had no puzzling doubts or queries to place forward. He wanted only to hear more. As Srila Bhakti Siddhanta made his exit, Abhay bowed, offering his obeisances, and then left the intimate circle of sannyasis in their row of tent and went to the outer circle of tents, his mind surcharged with the words of his spiritual master. Jagadguru Srila Prabhupada ki